We'll be reading from the Srimad Baghavatam, and I'll just start with invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 All right, so today's verse is chapter 19 of the 9th canto, verse 3. Okay, so I'll go ahead and everyone can repeat. Basta eko vane kaschid.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Swakarma vashagamajam.
Swakarma vashagamajam.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Swakarma vashagamajam.
Swakarma vashagamajam.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Swakarma vashagamajam.
Swakarma vashagamajam.
Please go ahead and chant.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Swakarma vashagamajam.
Swakarma vashagamajam.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Darshakupe patitam.
Swakarma vashagamajam.
Swakarma vashagamajam.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Swakarma swaganamajam.
Swakarma vashagamajam. You want to try it, Demiel?
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Basta eko vane kaschid.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Vichinvan priyamatmanaha.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Dadarshakupe patitam.
Swakarma vasagamajam.
Swakarma vashagamajam. Mataji's. Basta eko vane kaschid. Vichinvan priyamatmanaha. Tadarshakupe patitam. Swakarma vashagamajam. Basta eko vane kaschid. Vichinvan priyamatmanaha. Dadarshakupe patitam. Swakarma vashagamajam. So now we'll do the word for word. Bastaha.
Bastaha.
Goat.
Goat.
Ekaha.
Ekaha.
One.
One.
Vane.
Vane.
In a forest.
Forest.
Kaschid.
Kaschid.
Some.
Some.
Vichinvan.
Vichinvan.
Searching for food.
Searching for food.
Priyam.
Priyam.
Very dear.
Very dear.
Atmanaha.
Atmanaha.
For himself.
For himself.
Dadarsha
Tadarsha,
saw by chance,
saw by chance,
kupe
Kupe,
within a well,
within a well,
patitam
Pitam,
fallen,
fallen,
swakarma vashagam
Swakarma,
under the influence
under the influence
of the results
of the results
of fruitive activities.
of fruitive activities.
Ajam,
Ajam,
a she-goat.
she-goat.
Now we'll read the translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. While wandering in the forest, eating to satisfy his senses, a he-goat by chance approached a well, in which he saw a she-goat standing helplessly, having fallen into it by the influence of the results of fruitive activities. Purport. Here, Maharaj Yayati compares himself to a he-goat and Devayani to a she-goat, and describes the nature of man and woman. Like a he-goat, a man searches for sense gratification, wandering here and there, and a woman without the shelter of a man or husband is like a she-goat that has fallen into a well. Without being cared for by a man, a woman cannot be happy. Indeed, she is just like a she-goat that has fallen into a well and is struggling for existence. Therefore, a woman must take shelter of her father, as Devayani did when under the care of Shukracharya. And then the father must give the daughter in charity to a suitable man, or a suitable man should help the woman by placing her under the care of a husband. This is shown vividly by the life of Devayani. When King Yayati delivered Devayani from the well, she felt great relief and requested Yayati to accept her as his wife. But when Maharaj Yayati accepted Devayani, he became too attached and had sex life not only with her, but with others like Sharmishta. Yet still he was dissatisfied. Therefore, one should retire by force from such family life as Yayati's. When one is fully convinced of the degrading nature of worldly family life, one should completely renounce this way of life, take sannyas, and engage himself fully in the service of the Lord. Then one's life will be successful. Om Ajnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll read the translation one last time. While wandering in the forest, eating to satisfy his senses, a he-goat by chance approached a well, in which he saw a she-goat standing helplessly, having fallen into it by the influence of the results of fruitive activities. So there's one particular lesson that the Srimad Baghavatam gives us many, many opportunities to meditate on and learn and kind of go through it again and again. And one of those lessons is, it's a lesson that Maharaj Yayati is coming to his own realization of after many years of trying to enjoy sensual pleasure with his wife. And what he's realizing is that all of his attempts to enjoy his senses in the material world have been fruitless. And this is not the only pastime in the Bhagavatam that teaches us this lesson. And indeed, this doesn't just apply to Maharaj Yayati in his own particular case, in his own particular circumstances. It's not that he as an individual just got the combinations wrong, but rather this is, and this reality that the attempt to enjoy, to become happy in the material world through experiencing pleasure through the senses, it is universally doomed, basically. And there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that really kind of says the essence of this aspect of the philosophy in a very nice and succinct way. Krishna says, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukha yonaya evate adyantavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses, O son of Kunti. Such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. And one of the treasures of Srila Prabhupada's books is that he gives a word-for-word translation of each Sanskrit word in these verses, and by going into the verses and seeing what words are actually used and how they're being put together, we can get even more out of it by putting that together with the translation. And here the words, what's being said is, what we're looking for is bhoga, enjoyment. We're looking for enjoyment in the material world, bhoga. And but the particular way that we're looking for it is, we're looking for bhoga, which is samsparshaja. Samsparsha means touching or coming into contact with various kinds of sense objects in this world, whether they be smells that we're touching through our nose, images and forms that we're touching through our eyes, tastes that we're touching through our tongue, various kinds of sounds or music that we're touching through our ears, or of course things that we're physically touching with our hands, or are touching or coming into contact with our skin in some way. The kind of enjoyment, the way that we're seeking happiness is we're counting on enjoyment that comes through that kind of contact. I'm going to reach out with my tongue, with my eyes, with my ears, and I'm going to touch the things of this world. And there's going to be an exchange of pleasure that takes place through that. And that's how I'm going to be happy. So Krishna is saying in this verse that that specific kind of enjoyment is actually the source of suffering. It's only the source of suffering for the living entities. And furthermore, that persons who are intelligent and who are very thoughtful about how they spend their time and their energy in life, understanding that we have limited time, we have limited resources, and that the intelligence we've been given in this human form of life is meant to be used to figure out what is the best way to live, what is the most sound way to live, what are the proper goals to pursue, based on having considered what the scriptures are educating us in. And they've recognized there's particularly two really big problems with this kind of enjoyment, which is that they begin at a particular point and it ends at a particular point. And that's a problem for us as eternal living entities, because we don't begin at a particular point or end at a particular point. We've always been existing. We're definitely existing now, I think, right? And we're going to continue existing, not just for another few years, or not just until we're 70, but actually we're going to go on existing forever. Long after this material body that we're currently in is gone, we're still going to be continuing to exist. If we were actually going to live only until we're 70 years old and then we were going to just poof out of existence, then it might be okay to accept this idea that, well, as long as I set myself up for retirement in this lifetime and I can be in a comfortable home and have plenty of leisure activities available to me, we might be able to accept that as an okay proposal if we were actually going to blink out of existence around the age of 75 or 80. But the first thing that Krishna teaches us in the Bhagavad Gita is that you never came into existence at any point. You're never going to go out of existence at any point. You're eternal in the sense of always having existed and you're always going to continue to exist. So if we as eternal living entities are going to truly be happy, we need to come into contact with a kind of happiness that's as eternal as we are. And so this is why intelligent persons, when they look at the happiness derived from sense gratification, and they see that it has this beginning point and end point, they see that's a problem. I'm not going to go for that. And therefore the translation is, the wise man does not delight in such pleasures. So this is essentially the lesson that Maharaj Yayati is, he is coming to actually have realization of it. He's a great Vedic king, so he's probably read this verse before in the Bhagavad Gita. But not all of us are fortunate enough to be able to hear the lesson simply by hearing. And Maharaj Yayati is an example, like probably most of us in the age of Kali particularly. We tend to learn these lessons the hard way. So Maharaj Yayati, after passing many, many years attempting to enjoy various kinds of sensual pleasures in household life, and particularly enjoying sexual pleasure with his wife, he's coming to the realization that he hasn't actually gained any satisfaction through that. That was stated in the previous verse. It said that in due course of time, when he became disgusted with sexual enjoyment and its bad effects, he renounced this way of life. And that's the reason why he's narrating this story. So, although he was married to the very beautiful Devayani, and he was enjoying life with her, he still wasn't satisfied. And Prabhupada says that he was too much attached. He was so attached that he still wanted to enjoy with other women, even though he had his wife. And so he made the mistake of enjoying with Sharmishta, and this made his wife Devayani very upset, and then her father cursed him to become old. And you might think that at this point, a young man having been cursed to be in an old man's body with wrinkles and gray hair and arthritis and cataracts and cannot enjoy, you might think that could be a positive moment of reflection for him, where he'd be thinking, you know what, I tried enjoying with my wife, I wasn't satisfied, so I expanded my field to other women, and still I wasn't satisfied. And if I regain my youth so that I can go back to that, it's not going to satisfy me. It's, you know. But he was so convinced. He was so convinced that this kind of pleasure would bring him happiness that he begged Shukracharya. He begged Devayani's father, saying, "Please, I haven't yet enjoyed enough with your daughter. Please have mercy upon me. Let me regain my youth so that I can continue to enjoy. It's too soon for me to give up this enjoyment." And embarrassingly enough, he was so committed to this quest for material happiness that when he was given the option of exchanging his old age with the youth of one of his sons so that the son would become an old man and he could continue his youthful existence, he actually accepted this proposition, and he was willing to condemn his own son to premature old age, depriving him of his own prospects of enjoying his youth, one's own progeny. He accepted that just to be able to continue. And later on in this verse, we'll read the statement by Maharaja Yati where he states, "I have spent a full 1,000 years enjoying sense gratification, yet my desire to enjoy such pleasure increases daily." So not only is he not gaining satisfaction from it, but the desire is just increasing. And so we really should take his example as all the proof that we need that we're not going to gain happiness by this particular kind of attempt to enjoy through sense gratification. That sense gratification will lead us dissatisfied and just with more and more intense desires to enjoy. And the example given here in this story is he's comparing himself to a goat who is grazing in the forest, looking for pleasurable things to eat. And Prabhupada states this is exactly what we are doing. We're wandering here and there, seeking sensual pleasure, seeking sense gratification. And it made me think of the example of, like, say for example, in India there's many dogs who roam the streets, and they just spend their day kind of wandering here and there, looking for food, hoping that somebody will give them some chapatis, or or they'll be able to find something in a garbage can. And so if you pass by a particular spot and you see there's this one dog, he's wandering around looking for food, and then you go about your day and you pass by there a little bit later in the afternoon and you see that same dog, he's still there looking for food, and then later on you pass by in the evening, that same dog is still there looking for food, then you can conclude that he hasn't satisfied his hunger. He's still hungry, and the evidence is that he's still there looking around. And if you should happen to come by later in the day and you see that dog is just sitting down, looking very peaceful and happy, then you can assume that, okay, maybe somebody came by and gave him 10 chapatis, he got the mother load, or maybe somebody accidentally dropped a box of Mahaprasadam from the temple and Mahaburfis or something, and he just, he had a feast, and then he's just sitting there like, okay, no need to wander about anymore because my hunger is satisfied. So as Maharaji Yati is saying, that actually my desire to enjoy these pleasures just increased daily. The wandering just continues. And so you can see that day after day, we're trying to enjoy the same kinds of things, the same kind of pleasure of the tongue, the same kind of pleasure of the sexual pleasure. And so we can conclude from our own continuous wandering that we're not coming to any point where we're actually satisfying our hunger. Just like, because if we did come to that point, then just like that dog who just sat down and was like, okay, I'm satisfied, we would be happy. We wouldn't feel the need to continue looking. And Lord Chaitanya teaches that Brahmanda Pramite Kona Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij, that the condition of the souls in this world who are conditioned by material desires is that they're going up and down in this world, living in different kinds of positions. Sometimes they're on the earth planet trying to enjoy here. Sometimes they gain enough pious credit to go to the heavenly planets and try and enjoy there. Sometimes impious behavior brings them down to the lower planets to suffer. And they're kind of going up and down in this situation. And in each sphere, they're really giving their best effort to try and enjoy their senses. And so we can see with a little bit of introspection that actually, if there was any happiness in sense gratification, we definitely would have gotten it by now. We definitely would have gotten it by now. And I personally have that realization with sleep. Trying to gain happiness from sleeping. I'm very much in the mode of ignorance, and that's like one of my go-to forms of happiness. Like I just want to sleep more. It's like during japa period, just like I'm here, toughing it out, but I could just go back to my bed and lay down, and it sounds so nice. And then so many times I give in to that, and especially before moving into the temple, you can sleep as much as you want. You can sleep in every morning if you're not if you have if you have a job that doesn't force you to wake up early, then you can sleep in as late as you want. And so I can just recall like countless mornings where I thought, yes, I'm really gonna have a nice time. I'm gonna be happy because I can sleep as long as I want. But then I never really felt satisfied, and I kept doing it again and again. And then, so at one point, studying Prabhupada's books and just kind of reflecting on this, I realized like, if there was any happiness in sleep, I definitely would have got it by now, because I'm really a pro sleeper. I've dedicated myself to that activity so much. And if there was happiness in it, I definitely would have gotten it by now. So if there was happiness in pleasing the tongue, we definitely would have gotten it by now. We've had so many opportunities to eat at restaurants, so many different kinds of cuisine, and it's just not there. We should come to the realization that there's no chance of happiness. And actually our desires are just increasing more and more. And so in this purport, Srila Prabhupada makes statements about family life, and particularly the kind of family life that Maharaji Yati was practicing, which would of course be defined by the consciousness with which he's approaching family life. So he's approaching family life with this consciousness that everything, the purpose of everything is to please the senses. But if our individual search for sense pleasure in the material world is hopeless, then a collective search for sense pleasure is equally doomed. And so it's a dire mistake of thinking that family life is for pleasing the senses. When we enter family life in that kind of consciousness, then as Krishna defines the living entities in this world, he says that what are their activities? That they're engaged in exploiting the material energy, trying to be happy, and trying to exploit the material bodies of others. And so family life just becomes this kind of mutual exploitation, consensual mutual exploitation that doesn't elevate us in any way, but rather just continues the burning of the material desires within our heart. And so this is the kind of family life that Srila Prabhupada is condemning in this purport and saying that we must walk away from. And if we look at the statements, we see that Prabhupada's chosen his words very precisely. Citing Maharaj Yati's dissatisfaction with sex life, he says, therefore one should retire by force from such family life as Yayati's. So what kind of family life? The family life that Yayati Maharaj was, that kind of family life. And when one is fully convinced of the degrading nature of worldly family life, one should completely renounce this way of life, take sannyas, and engage himself fully in the service of the Lord. So what kind of family life is degrading in nature? He says worldly family life. So he's specifying a particular kind of family life, which means that he's not condemning all family life outright. But worldly family life, it tangles us in this web of mutual exploitation, and it distracts us from the real business of human life. So what is the real business of human life? The purpose of our lives individually, as eternal individuals, is to reawaken our real nature as eternal servants of Krishna. Jivera Swarupa Hoy Krishnara Nitya Das. We are eternal servants of Krishna. And in material existence, we also can't get away from this nature to serve. Even if we don't serve Krishna, we're always serving someone. We may be serving our boss, we may be serving our country, we may be serving our spouse, serving our children, we may be serving our neighbors and friends. We have this nature to serve, and it comes from our eternal nature as servants of Krishna. And so if that's our purpose individually, then the purpose of family life, which is collective living, living entities coming together to live together under one roof, that should also be based on the ultimate purpose of the individuals who make up that collective, who make up that family. Because we remain eternal individuals, whether we're single or in a family. So then the purpose of our life should remain the same, whichever state we're in. So that is actually the purpose of family life. The purpose of family life is to support each other in that eternal quest of turning towards Krishna, reawakening our eternal relationship of loving service with Krishna, and therefore devotional service to Krishna. We place that at the center of all our activities as the cynosure of everything that we're doing in family life. And so Srila Prabhupada is encouraging that one should renounce worldly family life, renounce the materialistic way of life, and take sannyas and engage himself fully in the service of the Lord. Then one's life will be successful. And so one may be wondering how we can imbibe the spirit of sannyas, renouncing the material world, renouncing materialistic way of life, even while we're living in as householders. And as a householder, one has to interact with the material energy in so many ways. So there's a very nice indication of how to kind of cultivate this mood of renunciation and detachment from worldly life, and at the same time be an active participant in family life, not to be distant and cold from one's family members. And so we find in the Srimad Baghavatam, in Queen Kunti's prayer, she says, Tvayi me nanya vishaya matir matupate sakrit ratimu dvahata dadha gange vau kamudanvati. O Lord of Madhu, as the Ganges forever flows to the sea without hindrance, let my attraction be constantly drawn unto you without being diverted to anyone else. And for those who are familiar with Queen Kunti, we all know that she's the mother of the Pandavas. She's the mother of 5 sons, or 6 sons. Shh, don't tell anyone. And when her sons were cast out into the forest by the intrigues of Duryodhana, she went with them, and she stayed with them, and she was always showering her motherly affection and upon them and looking after them. And so one might be kind of surprised to see here that she's praying to Krishna, let my attraction be drawn unto you without being diverted to anyone else. And Srila Prabhupada, interestingly enough, the very first thing that he addresses in the purport, I think it appears to me, is this doubt that may enter into somebody's mind that, well, that seems kind of cold. She's the mother of 5 sons. How can she properly act in that motherly role if she's got this mentality of, I just want my attraction to be for Krishna, nobody else? And Prabhupada states at the very beginning of the purport that perfection of pure devotional service is attained when all attention is diverted towards the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And then Prabhupada says, to cut off the tie of all other affections does not mean complete negation of the finer elements, like affection for someone else. This is not possible. A living being, whoever he may be, must have this feeling of affection for others, because this is a symptom of life. So Prabhupada is saying here that affection is actually a symptom of life, that even though Queen Kunti knows very clearly that Krishna and loving devotional service to Krishna is the ultimate goal of life, she naturally, as a living being, she has affection also for her sons. And Prabhupada goes on to say that actually it's only the objective of our desires that has to be changed. Desire cannot be negated, but in devotional service the desire is changed only for the service of the Lord, in place of desire for sense gratification. The so-called affection for family, society, country, etc. consists of different phases of sense gratification. When this desire is changed for the satisfaction of the Lord, it is called devotional service. So we can be showing affection towards our family members because we want to enjoy the interactions that come from those affectionate family dealings, or we can change the desire to the satisfaction of the Lord, and we can be showing them showing affection to friends, family members, knowing that I have a duty, I have a service to the Lord to support this person in realizing their real existence, spiritual existence as an eternal servant of Krishna, and understanding that in their current phase of life, they're not just a pure spirit soul completely unmoved by the modes of material nature, they're in a state of being a combination temporarily of spirit and matter, and I'm also in that situation. And so, for my sake and for theirs, I have to act appropriately in my role as a father, a mother, a brother, a son, a wife, whatever the case may be. And if I am doing that while directing my attention and all the attention of my family members to Krishna, then that's changing everything for the satisfaction of the Lord. And Prabhupada is saying that's called devotional service. When you change it towards the Lord, then it's devotional service. So family life where devotional service to Krishna is the center is bona fide and it's liberating. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings that when my family members and I are worshipping Lord Krishna in our home, then I see that our home transforms into Vaikuntha. It transforms into the spiritual world. And as Lord Chaitanya teaches, one doesn't necessarily have to renounce one's material position in society to be Krishna conscious, but one can stay in one's position and put Krishna in the center of their life, and that will spiritualize their whole life. And we should certainly understand that all of the material things in our life, all of the material relationships in our life on their own are like zeros. Prabhupada would say one can have so many things, a beautiful home, car, wife, a prestigious position in society, but all of these things are just like adding zeros to one another. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. They don't actually have any value in and of themselves. But Prabhupada would say that if you put a 1 in front of those zeros, then you have some value. If you have 3 zeros and you put a 1 in front of it, you've got 1,000. If you have 6 zeros and you put a 1 in front of it, you've got 1,000,000. And so Prabhupada is explaining that Krishna is that 1 that you put in front of the zeros, and if you add Krishna to your life, then every other aspect of your life, it will gain value in contact with Krishna. So our relationships with others in this material world, they gain value when we put Krishna in the center of them. And so, voila. So thank you for kindly tolerating my attempt to explain something of the wonderful Krishna conscious philosophy that we've been gifted by so many spiritual masters who have carefully preserved this knowledge over many generations, and we're receiving it from Srila Prabhupada and so many of Srila Prabhupada's followers who have, without whom we wouldn't know a fig about Krishna. And so thank you for kindly giving me the chance to purify myself by sitting up here and talking about this. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or anything? Christopher?
I have a question. My question is, the last point where you explained about, Prabhupada explaining to us, every motivation you have is 0 unless you put Krishna. So everything you can do in this world, there is a material way of doing it, and a spiritual way of doing it, and but maybe just, yes, so is that.
So does everything in the world have a material way of doing it and the spiritual way of doing it? Yeah, so sometimes the difference between the material way of doing it and the spiritual way of doing it is just a question of the consciousness of the individual. And at other times, the difference may actually be that the form of the activity changes. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in one of Prabhupada's purports, he says that here's one man working, he's at his job, and he's doing whatever he is. Maybe he's a postman, maybe he's a sandwich maker, whatever the case may be. Maybe he's a taxi driver. And then here's another man doing the same job, but one of them is absorbed in materialistic consciousness, and the other one is Krishna conscious. One of them is doing it for Krishna, as a service to Krishna, and he's going to engage all the fruits of that work in Krishna's service, and he's going to be thinking how I can do this in a nice way that will be pleasing to Krishna. And so in that case, like if say you're a postal man, then a mail delivery person, then it's really going to be more the consciousness that distinguishes the material way of doing it and the spiritual way of doing it. And in the case of how you eat, there is going to be some actual difference in the form, like because Krishna says that he wants us to offer him nice vegetarian foodstuffs, then we don't accept meat, and we always offer it to Krishna before eating it ourselves. And so in that interest, we're not tasting it while we're preparing the food. So in that case, it's like there is a spiritual way, like the whole process for doing it the spiritual way is a bit different from the process we're doing it the material way. But the essence of it is always the consciousness. Is that, as Krishna says, that you can offer me with love and devotion a fruit, flower, water, leaf, and I'll accept that. So it's the main thing that he's requesting, because the word bhakti appears in that verse twice, is that it's really the devotion that he wants. He wants to see us turning our natural propensity of service towards him and doing it to please him. And that's really the difference between the spiritual way and the material way, in essence. Is that helpful? Go ahead.
Another question,
Mm-hmm.
if I can. As I like, we can engage every emotion we have in Krishna, except envy.
Mm-hmm.
So, could you explain on that? Why envy you cannot engage it?
Why envy? Yeah, because envy is really about wanting to put yourself above the other person. And so I mean, there may be some emotions that we generally like kind of go hand in hand with envy. Like often we're angry at somebody that we're envious, or we're jealous of them. And there are ways that those kind of feelings can be engaged, but because like the crux of envy is I want to be in the center and I want everybody to worship me, there's not really a Krishna conscious way to do that. But there is one example. There's a story told by His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj, where he tells that he was feeling envy towards one devotee, and he was trying to deal with it himself, but he just couldn't get over it. He just was always feeling this envy towards this devotee. So finally one day he brought it towards Prabhupada. He brought it to Prabhupada, and he told him that I'm having this envy towards this devotee. And Prabhupada said, well, have you tried thinking, have you tried considering that this envy won't help you in any way, and it won't get you anywhere? You won't be making any progress by this envy? And he said, yes, I've been considering that, and I've been trying to convince myself to give it up on that basis, but it hasn't worked. And then so Prabhupada thought for a moment, he said, well, envy basically means not liking someone. So that propensity to not like somebody, that should be directed towards the demons and those who criticize devotees or making offenses towards devotees, persons who are trying to obstruct Krishna consciousness. You should direct your not liking propensity towards them. And but then of course from that answer one might not really know exactly what to do. Like, okay, how should I manifest my not liking? Should I just go and like punch them in the face? And so Giriraj Maharaj shares his personal realization of, since he was the recipient of that instruction, his personal realization of he was thinking that really the best way of not liking demons and atheistic persons in society is to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. You know, by distributing Srila Prabhupada's books far and wide, this is like the last thing that envious persons, demoniac persons who don't want to see Krishna consciousness flourish in the world, or want to obstruct the devotees in some way. Yeah, so that was Maharaj's realization about that. But other than that, I've always heard also that you can't really engage envy. Sure. Anything else? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantharaja Srimad Baghavatam ki jai.
His Grace Shantatma Das Prabhu ki jai.
Thank you for your mercy.